But our first, okay. Oh yes, I'm sorry. We like to have this session recorded. So if anybody is objecting to that, please just put it in the chat. But hopefully you are in agreement because it is something that we can then review again. Thank you. As I said before, but would like to say it again, our first respect always sits with First Nations. In Australia, the situation for First Nations people is still dire straits and appalling. We still do not have recognition in the constitution of our First Nations people. They still have a shorter lifespan and many more people in prison than the Australian population at large. Colonisation has brought devastation, and as a result, there's a high level of trauma that now has become intergenerational. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the name of our First Nations people, have now asked for a referendum to have a voice to Parliament, a body that will be consulted before decisions are made that affect their lives. Let's hope that the Australian people will support them and vote yes. It'll be towards the end of this year, and we all really hope that that will happen. So let me talk a little bit about colonization and colonization's impact on multiple oppressions. Many migrants and refugees to Australia are from colonized countries. The experience of colonization plays a role in inspiring migration to Australia, particularly for those from British colonies, which is large parts of Africa, for example. Commonwealth countries in the past, these formed part of the Colombo Plan that allowed students from African countries to study in Australia after the White Australian policy. For those who don't know, we used to have a policy of migration because Australia is a country of migration, let's face it, apart from the indigenous people. And it had a policy to only allow white people to migrate to Australia. Atrocious, yes, I know. And in fact, it was the American soldiers that changed it, because then there was all of a sudden black soldiers and they had to accommodate for that in the policy. But would you believe it, once the war was over, they went back to the White Australia policy. That's just an aside, but an interesting fact in history and background. Whereas colonization would have brought certain benefits, including ability to function in the English language and familiarity with English culture, lack of trust of the system is heightened due to enhanced awareness of racism, which impacts their capacity to engage in relevant processes that support belonging and social inclusion. People became aware of roadblocks to growth and social participation, which increases their fragility. For migrant women, migrants and refugees who do not come from English-speaking countries suffer the jeopardy of spending years learning English, which limits their capacity to sometimes access appropriate employment and career prospects. People become unemployed or underemployed. Women face increased oppression as they undertake caring responsibility whilst trying to restart their careers, and also gender bias as all women face. Our research into the economically untapped potential of migrant women clearly shows that despite higher levels of education, migrant and refugee women face high levels of unemployment and underemployment, especially if they're from a non-OECD country. These are also countries where largely women of color come from, and those face an increased level of racism. The extent of racism in society has been overlooked, we think, but those impacted by racism carried as a stark reality that they have to contend with on a daily basis, such that whenever they are given the opportunity to discuss issues that inspire violence, for example, violence against women, they automatically refer to racism as a form of violence, not physical or emotional violence, nor intimate partner violence of any sort, but racism. For example, several groups of women from Africa were given an opportunity within a project to talk about violence against women. These women were from different states in Australia, and invariably every group spoke about racism. and its impact on their emotional, physical, and mental health. They surmise that colonization, migration, and racism together create intergenerational trauma and difficulties around parenting, mothering while Black is a term that some young African background mothers are using who themselves face racism, but need to support their children who are also facing racism, trying to instill in them a sense of positivity. So in many ways, we were very grateful of the Black Lives Matter movement, of course, as it brought a lot of issues to the fore. But for our young people in Australia, it was also in some ways a difficult time because the Black identified people are the First Nations people of Australia. And so the young people said, we're Black people also, but we don't know where we sit in this dichotomy around Black Lives Matter. So it was actually quite a difficult conversation in the Australian context. The system does not recognize racism, and people who identify racism at times feel unable to name it. But those impacted by it feel incapacitated and helpless as the system does not recognize it. We have systems in place, of course, to address discrimination on the basis of race, as there has to be, but the victims find them ineffective in bringing resolutions to their situation. And my phone keeps going off. I think it's from New York. Increasingly in Australia, we talk about calm women, culturally and racially marginalized women. This term is something we could discuss later. But the term at least acknowledges that they are marginalized by the system society. It calls out race as well. Let me briefly talk about migration and why and I'm getting there. Let me briefly talk about migration and why we think CSW needs to have a space where issues can be discussed that relate to migration and women in migration. At the moment, migrant women only figure in the context of international labor laws, which is another area we'd like to discuss. In the last 2 decades, we have seen unprecedented population movements. There have been conflicts that increased numbers of refugees, for example, across the world, Syria, Afghanistan, now the Ukraine. However, there are many refugees from the African continent, whether for economic reason or war and conflict, the migration is constant. And this applies, of course, across Asia too. At the moment, most northern countries and some southern countries compete for skilled labor all over the world. For example, Australia never has had as many temporary economic migrants than in the last 2 decades. This can be a great thing if only these migrants were not disadvantaged. We know from women in particular that their career prospects are diminished, that they are typecast into certain jobs, that they by necessity work in low-paid jobs. As set out, they also face racism and feel invisible. Their needs are not seen. Services are not sufficiently targeted towards them. They deliver an underclass that can be exploited. Here too, there are differences depending where one comes from. White privilege is well and truly alive, even though some would also say that accents like mine and from some other countries are also singled out, but not in the same degree as around race. Their children may also achieve less, and the girls are living between 2 worlds, more so, girls more so, trying to maintain both cultures and be respected in both, and being responsible for cultural maintenance. We think at CSW, we should shed light on the plight of migrants too, and not assume that they just become part of the fabric of all women in a given country. Yes, we also do see that poorer countries are delivering labor to richer countries are often severely oppressed. This too could be more elevated if in unity we stand with our migrant sisters and deliberate over our issues. Now, thank you. That's a long piece, but Tarsila is very ready to go and add and you know, also debate. I was thinking here around those different topics, intersections, multiple oppressions. So over to you, Tarsila. Thank you.
Thank you. You gave us a very complete panorama about the situation. From my perspective, as indigenous woman or woman from First Nations, because in the world, as you know, we call principally indigenous peoples because we are trying to use the legal dimension of the concept, no? Worked in the United Nations during more than 40 years, trying to obtain our rights. And in this case, it's totally to use First Nations, native, no? Like in North America, they use native people, or in Canada, First Nations or other peoples. In this case, I want to share with you that we, around the world, indigenous peoples are 480 millions. And if we are the half of this population as women, we are 250 millions around the world with different cultures, but all of them with experience of colonization, evangelization, as you know, trying to be continue living as First Nation or indigenous peoples, but suffering all kind of imposition or oppression. Like Astrid said, before this millennium, we indigenous women of the Americas, we had a meeting and only trying to ask to us why we are in this situation in our countries. Because as you can imagine, we live in societies very, very stratificado. Do you understand? High class, middle class, and from middle class, low class, but low class divided too. And indigenous peoples or First Nations in these societies are the low class because no rights, because the colonization. And in this case, we ask as women, why we are in this situation? And we define the racism is the worst way of violence with us. Why? We answer that racism with expression in discriminations, how do you say, is against our self-esteem as first women of First Nation. They said, if we are not good in our self-esteem, it's not because we want. What happened during centuries? You are not a legal person, you are not official, your language is not official, you are, yes, you are women, but you are indigenous too. You don't have education, you are the poorest. The problem is how we can change this kind of ideology, because the racism is an ideology for us, because it's historic, structural, institutionalized in many countries. That's why when we talk about intersectionalities, we need to try to to see all dimensions because it's multi-dimension. And when we see the relation with age, is intergenerationally, because what is happening with women for us is elder, is a person with knowledge, is with wisdom, but from outside, they are only an old women. And if we see the aspect of the special or specific characteristics, no rights for them. That's our reality. In this case, I think if we talk about migration, for example, we need to see to the problem of internal migration. What is happening from communities to the cities, or in the cities, but in the popular area without basic services? Is racism and discrimination. What happened with the life of girls and young people or women in this scenario? They are more exposed to all kinds of violence and exclusion because the access to school, to education, or opportunities is nothing. When we talk about work with dignity, young people, migrant, internal migrant, they are not in the census, in the statistics, in the data. We need to ask for that. What happened with these women when they have to go out of the country? They don't find good opportunities because the language, because the education, because everything. That's one kind. But this related with discrimination based on racism and the violence not only from outside, including from inside of our communities. And the exercise of justice is not possible because the racism and exclusion. I think when we talk about intersectionality, if we have an example as girl or woman, indigenous women or women from nations or women of Afro-descendant are in the most vulnerable situation. We need to develop, I think, one kind of respect between each other, but to build to the solidarity between us as women globally, because many of us, many sectors are in the agenda, independent agenda. I think if we believe on rights, human rights, we need to think and try to do what are we doing, trying to work for basic rights as a human being, but as different people coming from different cultures, because we consider after 100 of years that our culture and our knowledge is very important, for example, to resolve the problem with climate change. Our knowledge is important to resolve some kind of disease related in our knowledge using the medicine plants. We need to open our mind to listen each other. That's my my commitment, I think. And that's why I am doing my Spanglish, excuse me. After I think we need to listen the participants, because the migration is affect in different kind, in different dimension, but is in all our body, all kind of discrimination, racism, and exclusion. But we are very strong. We are celebrating International Day of Women around the world, working, thinking, discussing, and looking for solutions. That's the most important thing. I think Astrid will continue with the second part of our introduction. Excuse me my Spanglish, but I try always, listen and repeating. That's my effort too.
Oh, you're doing very well, very well. We actually have a question, and so we might do that. We might take some questions and then maybe go back to our questions that I had posed. So this question is from Sophie. What's the best way that digital literacy be provided to indigenous girls if they're in rural areas and are not in school? How can girls in more developed countries advocate for rural indigenous girls? Tarsila, would you like to answer that?
Okay. We are, from many years ago, we are trying to have intercultural education in the public system of the states, not only for indigenous girls in the rural community, but for all the country, because we think that non-indigenous peoples of the country need to know how and what is the culture who produce, for example, potatoes and maize over the world. Are we? And in this case, we need an intercultural education, because now we need to be very strong about our culture, our knowledge, our rights, and our language. But we need to learn what is happening in the national system. In the past, we went out of the community because our mother decided to have better life for her daughter, for my experience. No? Before 10 years old, you have to go out because you need to learn the language of the others and try to learn how to write or how to read. Now we said it's not necessary to go as a servant, the girl, to go as a servant to learn the language. We need to have intercultural education in our proper place and to give good opportunities for new generation. That's why we try to put in the first priority intercultural bilingual education in the communities, but intercultural for all the country.
Thank you, Tarsila. And I think in the Australian context, much damage has been done to Indigenous people under colonization. And so to work with Indigenous people, there is policies that they have developed around how to work with Indigenous communities, but most importantly, the permission has to be sought from elders, and those elders include elder women. So the programs have to actually be supported, as Tarsila said, by the community themselves, and a dialogue that occurs to work out what is possible, not possible, supported, not supported, why, in which way, and all of that. And so it takes time to negotiate that, and often funders of such programs or those who are interested in funding such programs are not prepared to allow that time for it to develop in a culturally intersectional way. And so that is part of the issue of that sort of super systemic structure that limits the work quite often.
Yeah, but I want to add about the technology, because these days are discussing about the technology. In a rural area, in many communities, Africa, Asia, or everywhere, the access to technology of information and communication is pendant agenda. As you know, the COVID time teach us about how we are excluded from the implementation of policies in our countries. I'm from the mountain, from Ayacucho in Peru. My people, the mother has to go with their children to more up to try to capture the signal, the internet. The other thing is what kind of instruments, computer,
devices,
cellular, no? Oh my God, with one basic cell for 3 children, 4 children is terrible. We are in the pendant agenda about to access to technology and access to internet or information. And if you have some possibility, stop. It's terrible, very stressed. Yeah, we need to call to government to implement the access to technology and communication.
Yeah, which in itself could be empowering if we had it. It provides its own opportunities, doesn't it? So would there be some comments from the floor or questions? Yeah, somebody suggesting to collaborate with the industry, telecom industry giants. But of course, you have to still have a local infrastructure as well. Yeah, would somebody like to comment? You can put up your hand, or as this is a conversation circle, we can all have a conversation.
Yeah, please. We need comments from some migrants or some affected from different intersectionalities, no?
Oh yes, here we got Victoria Cuesta, please, go ahead.
Hello, yes, I'm an immigrant. I'm Venezuelan, but I live in Europe right now. And I feel like this topics about intersectionality and the industry and all this discussion really resonated with me, especially because I was thinking of the way it affects young women, such as like myself, in the sense that we get discriminated like for little things, even if it's like an accent, or because you know that in Spain, the Venezuelan accent is different to a Spanish accent. That already makes a difference, because when you're only communicating, you're already kind of targeted for being less, apparently. So, but since it's so institutionalized and it's so systematic, we kind of have to find a way to kind of uproot the social norms in which we see things like accent, race, and so on. But it's a challenge, isn't it? Yeah, that's all I wanted to comment on. But thank you for the discussion. I find it really insightful.
Thank you. Anybody else? Aurora.
I was just saying congratulations to Victoria for what she said. But personally, I come from the south of Italy. And although I come from Italy, there is still a difference. And we are still kind of discriminated when it comes to infrastructures, opportunities. Sicily is completely disconnected from the, like, let's say, mainland, and I had to go and to like go migrate, let's say, to move, let's say, to France. And I think sometimes it's also when there are discriminations inside countries and inside the global north, this can also have an impact, because of my accent. I'm not really accepted in the rest of Italy, and so I think that it's important to maybe acknowledge and work also on the differences and how intersectionality has an impact on women that are within the same country. Because although I'm seen as an Italian from outside, life is harder since I come from the south, and I don't have access to fundings, opportunities, and I live far away. And it's impossible for me to come home often because tickets are very expensive. So I'm always kind of often I'm isolated. So even within Europe, sometimes intersectionality can have a different impact, which is not necessarily based on race, but is based on locations. So yeah, maybe just wanted to share this.
And it's like a class effect too, isn't it? Around being seen as the poorer cousin and the less developed area and all that. Being from Switzerland, I know a little bit about your country, but yeah, I know all the economic development and all that is centralized in the north, isn't it? But the interesting thing is also that the accent reveals who you are, and which then leads to discrimination and you know. And also some forms of oppression.
Yeah, actually, there were like theories in the 19th century, scientific theories explaining that we were inferior as human beings because of the form of our skull. And this is still something that has been reproduced. And for example, getting abortion in the south of Italy is almost impossible. 90% of the doctors refuse to because of their belief, religious belief or personal belief. So yeah, it's hard to be seen as an Italian, but thank you for knowing and for responding positively to what I said. I leave the floor.
Oh, you're right. I think that whole economic development thing of being then also seen as peasants or more conservative or not knowing, you know, can be very strong. Yeah, Natalie.
Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little bit hard to hear. You might need to turn up your sound or...
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better, yeah.
Okay, I'll try and talk really loud. Firstly, thank you so much for running this session. It's been really, really informative. I just wanted to recognize my position of privilege before I ask my question. But I work in STEM, and as we know, 1/3 of women make up the STEM industry. How can the organizations I work in encourage and provide opportunities for disadvantaged women? So whether that's, if we look at intersectionality, women from different classes, different sexualities, are there proven methods or sort of methodologies we can use and reference just to encourage more women in? Because when we say, you know, let's bring more women into STEM, it's not always an inclusive statement. Because if we look at 1/3 of women, how many of those women are Caucasian, for example? So how can we encourage more women and make that an inclusive statement?
But just a question, if you're talking about STEM though, you're also talking about a fairly highly educated level or fairly high level of education, which I guess is exactly sort of a little bit opposite to what we're talking about, the sort of disenfranchised, like the groups that have less opportunity because of where they live or because they have been oppressed over centuries, or they're migrants that are not respected in the same way. So it probably makes it a little bit hard.
Yeah.
But there is the education piece around, these are really, you know, these can change the world if women were represented at the level that are usually men's fields. And so, you know, it changed a whole perspective. So STEM provides a lot of opportunities in that sense. Yeah. Yeah, I might get to Tatsila if you just wanted to respond to some of the location issues that were raised, for example, or relative economic disadvantage, or internal, you know, yeah, discrimination really, of what was meant to be a one nation, you know.
Yeah. Thank you very much for interventions, because enrich the discussion. No, when we talk between native women or indigenous women and with Afro-descendant, we are discussing about who is most discriminated, is by color or by that. And in this case, we are using racism in the sense of political decisions, because the racism is an ideology not only based on race, it's based that one person or others believe that other different is worse or low than them. That's the problem. And when a racist person arrives to the political position, they think that we don't need the basic services, no? And they need that we are worse because we are not from the capital, because we don't speak very well the official language. The racism is multidimensional, my darling. We need to build around the world an ideology against racism, anti-racism, because it's in from small power, small position to up, from up to down. That's our problem, related to with corruption. That's why the distribution, for example, of the public fund, how is it in our countries? Many, for me or my sector, we need a high quality of education, but what happened with other population of the same country? Nothing. I think it's necessary to see the differences, but think too that the difference is rich for us. It's not bad, it's rich. I think that racism is not related only with the color.
Yeah,
is related with everything. That's our problem, because it's the heritage of the colonizers or colonization. They come oppressed, take everything, and you are not nothing. In the immigration out of the country is the same, because who are in the power, who believe that they are better than us, don't give opportunity. Only the attitude is the exclusion or discrimination or stigmatization too.
Yeah, and I guess it's that being other than the dominant ideology and the dominant power holder. And I guess colonization has given the impression that you're less worth, and that and the colonizers saw the people as less worth. So the south of Italy was also colonized as a poorer, you know, isn't that right, Aurora? As a poorer, you know, that you had to sort of adopt, you know, but it was very much a colonized area as well. And so it's deep-seated over centuries, isn't it? Which then we have to find other uniting concepts that we can work with to have like a movement to, like you said, Tatsila, to actually find an ideology that binds us together, and an understanding around what racism is or minority disadvantage is. But I don't like the word minority as much either, because we're actually a big group of people. So, you know, Sophia.
Hello, I am a Girl Scout from the United States of America, and I just had a question. So in your guys' communities, where do girls and women get their access to political information and like news? And do they often have access to like engaging in politics?
Oh, that's a good question. You want to go first, Hatsila?
Please do, because I can't understand very well.
Oh yeah, sorry. How do you get access to politics and news, and how do you get access to the political process? So in your case, that might be more indigenous women. I can go first if you like.
Yeah.
Because the issue, of course, with migration is that they can't vote for a very long time. So you only can vote as citizens. So there's a level of disinterest around focusing on them, particularly if they're asylum seekers or even if they don't even have a permanent visa. And they can, and in Australia, we have a fairly comprehensive system of in-language media. So we have, you know, government-sponsored radios. We have also TV, and that's in language. However, the interesting thing's been over the last at least 10, 15 years is the digital development. And so now people are not necessarily listening to the news of Australia in their language. They're listening to international platforms and you know, private TV stations in their language and all that. And during COVID, this became particularly visible because people had overseas information that wasn't applicable to Australia. And so we actually had to get all the language speaking media together once a week during COVID time so that they actually could produce and disseminate information in language that related to Australia and the findings we had with COVID and everything like that, because otherwise they were following rules that were actually rules from their own country. So it's more and more difficult to make sure that political news and political information is actually reaching the audience, even if you're provided in language, because they use many different sources for information. And I'm not sure whether that's something that other countries have been experiencing too. Tatsila, did you want to respond around the political process?
I want to answer first to Natalie because I forgot to. In many countries, we have different kind of private schools. And we are trying to include the intercultural education system, including to private schools, because in the private schools, they learn, for example, from English or French, but what happened with the history or the heritage of our civilization in the context of that private school. We need to have intercultural citizenship in our countries where we are multicultural, because we need, for example, people like you, woman like you, if she has the opportunity to do something, if she knows how is the old society, she will act with justice. Because in our countries, the how do you say, the classes, social classes are very separated. Rich, not so rich, middle rich, only there. And what happened with from middle to down? No communication, no interaction, no solidarity, my dear. I am coming from Peru. We are suffering terrible situation related with national politic. How we elect to our representatives. We don't have a politic representative in the parliament or in the power. And we have many high corruption, injustice and everything, because it's rich country, but not rich for everybody. That's our problem. I think for us it's necessary to see how must be the system of education and the content of education, because it's the base for everything, for indigenous and non-indigenous, for poor or not poor. We don't have political education, is okay? And many candidates, for example, go to the communities and offer everything, many times in our proper language. But when they are in the power, they forget all the offers. They act only for proper interest. That's why, for example, it's necessary for us to access to education and information from our proper point of view. We need to see who is the candidate and what is the history of life of this candidate. Not one day appear and offer everything, and after they are acting as dictators. That's our problem. Why the colonization, the patriarchalism denied all our rights during centuries. That's our problem. We need to retake our proper values and try to build how we can contribute to democratic states who respects human rights and rights for everybody. That's what we want.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So I might go to Daisy and then Jules, and then I might come back to my questions. Yeah, or our questions that we developed. Daisy, would you like to go?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is such an interesting conversation. I'm Daisy. I'm based in New York. I work with the immigrant community here, with the Latinx immigrant community. And I'm also from Peru, same as Tarsila. So I'm so proud of you, Tarsila, representing as well. Well, just a comment and one question. Well, one comment I think is more connected to policies that have been helping women to move forward and to access to some opportunities everywhere in the world. So when we talk about parity policies, when we talk about like increasing access to education, when we talk about having a specific percentages of opportunities allocated to women just because of the gaps that we still have, I think those are policies that are not outdated. Those are policies that we need to keep pushing forward. And unfortunately, when we take a look about what happened during the pandemic and how we actually went back, and many women were forced to migrate, were forced to quit their jobs, were forced to not access to education opportunities because of all the crises that we went through now with the war happening in Ukraine, but in also other parts of the world, what is happening in Syria as well. So I think this is more connected to my question, is more like what is going to be the overall message at the end of these conversations, right? That we want to send out to the public in terms of what are we demanding. And I think that message needs to be strong in the sense that, unfortunately, even though when we conquer some rights and we were moving into the right directions, still we've seen that we went back, and that there has been a huge pushback in terms of girls not having access to education right now in some countries and in many other areas as well. And I think that message needs to be clear so we can push governments to really implement policies to move these things forward. I don't see other way to do it. I mean, the civil society can be definitely a strong player in this role, but when it comes to public policies that could impact like at a national level, I think that's something that we can capture. What are the things that we're working already worldwide that we can actually recommend to keep implementing? So that's from my perspective what I think we really need to create, that synergy in order to keep pushing forward into that direction. But at the same time, I was just wondering, like, if as part of these discussions there's going to be like a document and there's going to be a public statement just kind of summarizing, you know, like what was kind of the reflections as part of the discussion, and if there are going to be some recommendations as well.
Yeah. Thank you. And that is something we're just going to move on to in just a moment, because there was a proposition in the opening statement. So Jules, if you would like to go, and then after that, I'm going to pose that question. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. My name is Jules. I am from Colombia. I am a queer person, and I lived in Australia for a couple of years, like 10 years ago. And one of the things that I experienced while being there, and I am also a psychologist, I was working with victims of violence here and of the war before moving to Australia. And I really needed psychological help when I arrived Australia. And one of the things that I experienced while being there is that some of the people that I met that were also migrants from Colombia and from Latin America were LGBTQ people. So there's somehow, and it happens also in countries as conservative like Colombia and other similar countries, where we queer people migrate perhaps from small towns or rural areas to big cities, and we also migrate because we cannot make a living in these conservative countries to global north countries. So one of the things that I experienced and is that there's a lot of migration, like gender migration here. It's not about just about economic improvement, but try to make a living in a place where you perhaps have more rights or more ability to be yourself. And I have actually one friend who is a queer person who is in Australia right now and who doesn't have a visa, but she will never come back to Colombia because she cannot make a living here, and she's the son of a military person here. So I wonder, how can we recognize the migration of queer people because of being LGBTQ in conservative countries, especially right now where we're facing this backlash of rights in the global north. So in conservative countries like Colombia is even more. And I have also this question about in migration and in all levels of migration, because I have experienced it here in Colombia as being a psychologist, is that we are not prepared. One of the things that I experienced, I went to receive psychological services when I went there, and I didn't receive any help. And I was also talking with people who were working in mental health with First Nation people in Australia, because I was very interested in that. And I realized that they didn't have the people who knew about mental health there didn't have the necessary tools, and they wanted to help, but they didn't have the necessary tools to actually help people besides from a West global North wide perspective. And they didn't understood what the relationship with losing the language, with losing the culture, with losing, I don't know how to say this word in English, sorry, desarraigo, that this this sense that you lose your connection to the land where you're from. And that's something that happens a lot here in Colombia, where we have all this displacement. And for instance, where indigenous people are being removed and forced from their lands, and most of the people that, I mean, I'm not a therapist. I work in psychological education, but I know that most of the people that I work with, and that most of the people here in the universities, we don't have the tools, but we also experience transgenerational trauma, so we are not healthy ourselves. So I just want to raise this couple of things to this conversation, and thank you for everything you shared, Tarsila and Astrid, and everyone else.
Thank you, Jules. And there's certainly some things that yeah, that show another form of oppression, don't they, on the basis of your sexuality, and how can you be yourself, and being forced to migrate to be able to be yourself. Tatsila, you were going to respond before. I could see to Daisy. And I guess it's around the recommendations, but we also talked about human rights and the uniting forms of racism, and you know, the importance of culture, and whether there are some concepts that unite us all, that we could work up into something, into a recommendation. I guess that was the ideas that came. So do you want to respond, Tatsila?
Okay, Daisy. I think the first issue that we have to do is how we can work together, empowering on rights. That's the most important for me, because we lived during centuries isolated. Many communities don't receive policies from the government. We have policies, but the problem is how is implemented that policy. It's our problem. When the workers of the government, of the seat of the government, or the people with as an authority is racist, the policies are not implemented in good way. Now we have assistance programs for indigenous women or for rural women. Many of us empowered on right, we don't want program as assistance, because we have capability to do and to change the situation. That's what are we working during more than 40 years. In the past, nobody talked about racism in our region, in Latin America. After 25 years, now in Peru are talking about racism and discrimination. How including white people are trying to understand, and we want that they recognize that they have to be anti-racist, because they don't recognize. And when they elaborate the public policies, maybe it's minimum. In our country exist many laws, but what happened with the implementation? That's the problem. And the other thing is how we, as civil society in diversity, can build a proper specific agenda with consensus. We don't have civil society organizations articulated. That's a result of racism, my dear. Some group with this this color or this priority. Indigenous peoples died in the mountains or died in the march, or how do you say, in the public walking, and nobody said nothing because our indigenous died. That's our problem, is racism. We need to eradicate racism. As a recommendation, I think, until now, we need to recommend to invest in empowerment for all women on rights. We need to invest to know and to be very strong in our rights, and to be strong as movement, and try to learn how is the exercise of politic power in multicultural societies. Not only for me, not only for others, not only for me, for you, for others, because we are not only one culture or one kind of culture or point of view in our countries. We are diverse, and we need to be part of the political decisions to include to everybody.
It's also that human rights, you said before, it's almost like we need a human rights for equal opportunity and equal outcomes, regardless of location, race, indigeneity, LGBTQI, whatever it is, so that there is redress. And then we need the data for the different groups to see how well they are doing, so that we have some accountability. I think that is the other part of it, so that we can actually have the evidence and hold people accountable for saying it's not happening, and why is it not happening, and what have you done?
How we can develop the respect between the differences or the diversity. That's the challenge. Not only me, my group, how we can develop the respect between the differences. What the comment of Jules is the same, no? What happened with the difference, the intersectionality about with sexuality or not only gender, blah, 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 is terrible. And the self-esteem is terrible too, because the discrimination, the exclusion of the people who I consider is not like me. That's the racism as ideology.
And so maybe another way to ask the question is also, what is it that unites us? What can we use to unite us? So having respect for our own differences, which in a way we're doing here, but what are some of the concepts that unite us? Is probably another way of asking that, to see how we can move forward together. Anybody would like to have an answer to that? Yes, Victoria.
I feel like obviously I can't speak to every single case, but since we have been mentioning the case of Latin America, and it's the case that kind of impacts me as Latin American migrants, I think what unites us is that feeling of, despite having to move and having those like very existing diasporas going on, we still kind of have that hope that when we do move, or we are constantly in movements, that there is something better on the other side. I feel like that's something that unites us all, because when you move, you kind of hope for the best. Because of course, as was mentioned before, there's differences between like races, LGBT, classism, all of this different ingrained issues, but we all kind of desire the same thing. at the end of the day, to be accepted and to feel like the sense of familiarity despite being elsewhere, right? Yeah, that's what I think. Doesn't have to be correct.
Yeah, and also being able to achieve our goals for ourselves. Yeah, and I just had a hand up. Ani Kosi, is it? No, it just disappeared. But I think you're there, probably just on a different screen. Anyway, if you hear me, then please ask your question or make it your comment. I can't see her again. It's interesting that you said, you know, we're all in motion in some ways.
Are you talking about Neuma?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, Neuma, you'd like to go ahead?
I am Neuma Dantas. Okay, I represent the Servas Brazil, especially the development committee to Latin America. Hear me?
Yeah, we can't hear you very well.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it's better now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Eva?
Okay, would you like to share something, Neuma?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my internet is not good. Okay, I am Neuma Dantas. I represent the Servas Brazil, especially the. So I wanna say the world must turn its eyes to the lack of attention to the Yanomami people. Yanomami people in Amazonia, caused by the past Brazilian government. Now, the government of President Lula helped the indigenous population, including creating the indigenous minister to care for the city undernourished and abandoned Yanomamis. Women were disrespected, raped, used, and sickened. We ask help SOS to indigenous people in Brazil.
Yeah, Tatsila, did you want to respond?
I think for indigenous peoples in Brazil, now is a new opportunity. They have now the Minister of Women, no, is one indigenous woman, and I think in the Institute of Indigenous Peoples is one very smart woman. But we know in Brazil and everywhere, the problem is what happened with the right related with territories for indigenous peoples. Many interests in the territories and the industrial extractive industries are looking for. And the problem is if Yanomami are throughout of the territory, where they will go. They are not people of the cities or urban area. That's why I think Neuma is possible to have new opportunity with this government, but we need to be very strong and articulated between indigenous peoples or tribal peoples in Brazil. As you know, we have in Peru the non-contacted indigenous peoples in the Amazon, and our legislators are going back in the protection of this area. That's our problem. Exists some laws or policies, but the implementation and the respect of these policies are very weak and dangerous. No? Yeah, we need to globalize the problems to look for solutions from global, how do you say, supports, because as you know, many governments, if you said you are criminalizing or you are killing two activists, internationally, maybe they said, oh, no, my prestige. We need to use many strategies to defend our lives and our rights.
Yeah, and this has been an important conversation around that, isn't it? Elisa.
Yes, I wanted to support as a Brazilian national what Neuma said about the condition of women in Brazil and like how they are perceived overseas. I think really Brazil has a deep problem of institutionalized racism and institutionalized sexism. And when we see that like at a further extent, we can see that across social classes and ethnicities in Brazil, there are very, very big differences. And again, like the recent years have been very difficult with hunger and overall just child death and everything, and takes a particular toll on the women community in Brazil. So that's definitely something to address.
Yeah. So I was listening, thinking and hearing you all. So in some ways, we're also talking about marginalization, aren't we? Marginalization on the basis of culture, race, identity, and location, and the impact that has, institutionally deeply embedded, and the impact that has on us all, but also how are we going to fight this marginalization? That's sort of what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, somebody's putting up the hand. Because I think the benefit of a word like marginalization means it's not us, like often the blame is on the people themselves, isn't it? Like you should have better language, or it's your accent maybe, or it's because of where you come from, or it's because you're a recent migrant, or it's because you live in the hills, or your communities are behind. We know that, all those kind of things really. But marginalization means you're being marginalized by something. You're not marginalizing yourself. It's something that's happening to you. And I sort of like that in terms of terminology, because too long have we said, particularly in my field in domestic violence, oh yeah, there's poor access to services, but that's because they don't have the language and the culture is different and they don't understand the way we view domestic violence, all those kind of things, and it's their cultural practice. Sometimes we hear that too. So that puts the onus on to the people that are already the suffering ones. So maybe that's a concept to look at. Tarsila.
I want to say only that is very, very helpful, this kind of conversation and discussion. We share from different parts of the world, and we discover that we are, all women are committed with rights, and we need to continue struggling intergenerationally, because we are thinking that new generation will be better than our generation, because new context, and try to to have a standard of better life with dignity for all girls, youth, and women over the world. That's my aspiration.
Mm, mm. And I think you're right, to have those conversations are important, aren't they? Also at CSW, yeah. Faiza? I see your hand up. Faiza Noor?
Faiza Noor.
Yeah, it's got her hand up, but not sure. Any other comments or suggestions? There was one, you know, talking about Ebony saying about the centrality of anti-racism, as so many of us are facing intersectional discrimination. Yeah, that's certainly a key concept that has come out. Any other voices? We still have 5 minutes, so.
Maybe Terry can make some comments. Are you there, Terry?
And yeah, we got Patricia's hand up. So Terry can give a few minutes to think. Patricia, and then yeah, Faiza, the hand is still up. Patricia, you want to go?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I guess overall, I wanted to comment my experience a little bit, and the fact that I've worked with several organizations as a consultant, and my native country is Portugal. And in Portugal, we have a lot of immigrants from South America, especially Brazil, Venezuela a little bit, all over Europe. And the main thing that's happening in Portugal right now is not that we are, well, I'm speaking for what the data that I've gathered. So the people aren't against the immigrants. The people, they are against the government, what the government is doing for the immigrants. Because Portugal is in a very deep crisis and families have very little help. In cases of immigrants, like the people from Brazil, for example, they end up getting some help because it's from the European Union most of the times and not exactly from the Portuguese government. But that creates this awful energy against the immigrants because they blame the immigrants to take away jobs, when in fact that's not really happening. It's the image that the government is passing on, that they are willing to help them, but not us. And I really have no idea how we can face this data because the media doesn't help. The media, well, it's basically controlled by the government by now. So we can't really pass on what's really happening, and it's really unfair because I'm an immigrant myself. I'm not in Portugal right now, I'm in Switzerland. And I know how hard things can be, but I also know that we can help each other. And it's not right that the government is creating all these images and making people feel like they shouldn't be helpful and like they should dislike this and like that we should shut down the borders, you know. So I don't know. I think I'd like to know if anyone has any idea how we can change this a little, how people can go back to the way they were, helpful, because we are really embracing people, we help. But now with all these ideologies, is very complicated for people to accept them.
Ideology of division, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And that needs that movement that Tarsila is talking about, uniting, isn't it?
Exactly.
And maybe your country is relatively late to that piece, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very corrupt government, you know. So they say the wrong things, like they say students, Portuguese students, the prime minister said should go away because even if we have a high education, we should go away because there's no job for them there, for us there, and they prefer the immigrants to come and for us to go away. So again, they influence how we feel and how people feel about the immigrants, and it's unfair to them because it's not their fault.
It creates division. Yeah. Yeah, we have Marcella as well. And that's probably about the last comment we can take now.
Hello, I hope that you can hear me. I am in the
Yes.
telephone. Agreeing very much with what Tarsila has said. Hola, Tarsila. I want just to raise something that we have been discussing in our group. I belong to the NGO group working with ECLAC, with migration, and something that we have been discussing quite a lot, at least for the Latin American. In the case of migrant, we should start rising the whole contribution that migrants bring to the countries in transition or to the countries where they are staying. And with that, we have to work very closely with the communication media, because this is important to show that also in the case of Europe, I live partly in Europe here in Italy, the migrants are, we could say, the new blood, because population doesn't reproduce. And that is also a big contribution that we must insist. I am a former migrant in Sweden for a long, long time because I was a political refugee. And one of the things that we had to fight with was exactly to show what we were giving to this new society, because we were young. Many of us have been educated, others not. But this, I think, it's a very important issue. We have to make sure that the population that migrants in this case are agents of also of change, even if it looks like a sort of, but we have to rise this with this very important contribution of this position. There are some studies in Brazil that have shown, in some areas in Brazil, that have shown the contribution of the migrant, but also ECLAC has made a very interesting study for whole Latin America on how, even in money, the migrants are contributing. So I think that we have to look also, and we have to work in a positive way in this line. Thank you.
And that's one of the reasons we should have further discussion as CSW around migration and the impact.
Exact. And that is
which is
very,
where we started
very
off, which is nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's,
Thank you, Marcela. Wally, important point or not?
I'm sorry, I have no picture. I'm from Germany, and I have a great esteem for Tacita and for all the women speaking here. I'm a political woman, and I have my experience is a very suffering one sometimes, but it is also a very wonderful one. With women of migration, with the refugee women we had from 2015 on, a great part of the refugees were women with children. And now with the Ukrainian woman, it's the same thing. We have most of the refugees of Ukraine are women with children. But my first impression was naturally, or my first intuition was, intention was to help. But I learned that my help has to be in response to the needs the women declare. And this is a very difficult thing. You want to help because you know the institutions, you know all things you can do, and you have to restrain, because the institutions, and this you learn very, very thoroughly, I have to say, that the institutions are not make up and come up with all that what happens around the world. And we have to be when we have people coming to us and be migrants in our country, we have to listen to them. We have what is said all the time, has been said here and everywhere where we discuss that. But it is also for us, the women in a responsibility for help. It is difficult sometimes not to be a master woman, not to do things that, how could I say that?
Yeah, that's right. It has to be in collaboration.
To take away the decision making from the woman coming to us. So
they lead.
That is a problem. Yeah. I don't know if it is, but I myself feel so, and a lot of my colleagues and my comrades in politics feel the same. So we have to. This is a process, but I think we should do this together and communicate all our sufferings and all our successful. What we do in success. Yeah. So we have a base where we can address us and to come to a solution which is helpful for everyone of us.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Wally. Much appreciated. Now we need to wrap up. So Tarsila, can I give you last comments?
Yes, please. Only to pay attention what happened in the country origin of migrants, how we can work there, how the government or make an agreements with the other countries, and the distribution of public fund related with issues of the cause of migrant.
And ideally so that they don't need to move.
Yeah, and the other thing is what happened in the country where we go, because it's another kind. All we listen in both parts, but I think the problem is what is happening with our rights in our proper country.
Yeah.
No.
And yeah, what are the push and pull factors to migration, and can we address those? And I think that's also in that field, isn't it? Oh, thank you for those last words, Tarsila. Myself, I want to really thank you all for the contributions. They were very interesting. We took some notes, but we'll also have a recording. So hopefully we can have that printed out as a transcript. And we'll make an effort to come up with some recommendations or concept and see how we can advance that in CSW, because there is quite a lot of interest, as we can see, in migration, but also that sort of intersecting colonization, indigenous peoples, and the sort of marginalization that we experience in very different ways, including sometimes in-country locations, the divisive nature of the dominant and the marginalized, and how that is being exploited. So there are quite a lot of topics I feel would justify further conversations globally, as Tarsila says. So, so we will put our thinking caps on, but if anybody has any ideas, yeah, we certainly on WOFA and on LinkedIn, if anybody wants to follow us up. And we wish you a wonderful CSW for the next few days, and hope you have enjoyment. And thank you very much, Tarsila, and everybody who was here.
Thank
Go
you,
sisters. Go
Astrid, thank you for your patience and facilitating everything because of the language. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. My language is no good either.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
And have a wonderful time.
Bye.
I wish I was there.
Good day.
Next year, hopefully next year.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.